So, welcome to today's show. I'm here with Josh Grisdale, and Josh lives in Japan. He and I are going to talk about accessibility in Japan, what it's like to deal with a wheelchair there. But for those of you that are just meeting me on this channel, what I do is I share information for people that travel with challenges, no matter what the challenge might be. And I share information to help their friends and families have a good trip as well. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to live in Japan.
Sure. So my name is Josh. I'm originally from Canada. I always say I'm from Toronto, but that's only partially true. I was born in Toronto, but I grew up in a very, very small town outside of Toronto on a sheep farm, actually. That's very, very far away from where I am now here in Japan. And I have cerebral palsy. When I was born, I had lack of oxygen or some other trauma to my brain, and that caused the signals from my brain to not properly communicate with my body. So that means that it's a bit more, I have difficulty with a lot of things with movement. So I can't walk and I can't use my hands very well. So I use a power wheelchair to get around wherever I go. You can't really see it, but maybe you can see my headrest there. So yeah, I use a power wheelchair that can recline and go up and down and stuff like that. So yeah, I was living out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of sheep. At my high school in the little town, there was a teacher who taught Japanese. And I thought that because I wanted to get into the IT field, that if I could speak Japanese, that would give me sort of a leg up on the competition, something else to put on my resume that would make me more hireable. And so that's why I started taking Japanese. And as I took Japanese, my teacher, he wasn't very strict in terms of homework or tests or something like that, but was taught a lot about the culture and history of Japan. And because of that, I got really interested in Japan, and I thought, I want to come to Japan sometime. So my first trip to Japan was in 2000. So after I finished high school, and I came here with my father. And at that time, there was like no information on what accessibility was like here in Japan, except for maybe a little bit at the back of a guidebook. And I think I found a Red Cross book from when they had some sort of big event here for rehabilitation or something like that, but it was quite out of date. So I came pretty much with a blank slate, but some friends in Tokyo. And as I came the first time, I was really, really surprised because I had in my mind, I had seen all these movies from Japan that it'd be impossible for me to do anything. But the reality was that I could get to a lot of stations, I could ride the train, not all the places, but there's a lot more than I thought I'd be able to do. So I had a really great experience in Tokyo for my first time. After that, I went back to Canada and I studied university, but I kept wanting to come back to Japan. So I came back a couple more times. And every time I came back, I was really excited because the accessibility got so much better each time. And because of that, I could go new places every time I visited. There's changes to the stations and getting around. And I decided that I want to move here, and I came here in 2007, and I've been here ever since. So there you go.
Oh, very interesting. And it's interesting when we talked the last time, I mentioned that I had lived in Okinawa for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I, we enjoyed our time in Japan a lot. Japan's a very interesting place. So tell me about your Accessible Japan website. Why did you start the website?
Yeah, so I started the website back in 2015. I had wanted to start a website to help people to come and enjoy Japan because I felt that there's a lot of poor understanding about the accessibility here. So I think a lot of people who maybe have an interest in Japan, want to come visit Japan, were put off by the feelings that Japan was not an accessible location. And because of that, I want to sort of break that image. I want to let people know that Japan is an accessible location and it's a place you can come visit. So that was one reason, but also the other reason was that I want to give that information to make it a smooth trip. And so because of that, I want to provide all the information that you need to get here. So I provide information on hotels, as well as a lot of the most famous tourist attractions, just the basic how to get around on the train, as well as the basics of just getting around in Japan, as well as the community aspect. So there's a forum on the website too, so people can ask questions. So that's sort of what the website is like.
Okay. Well, very nice. And so you told us also about the content on it. So let's talk a little bit about getting around in Japan. What is the best way to get around on the ground in Japan?
Japan has an excellent rail system. So if you're in one of the big cities, like if you're in Tokyo or if you're in Osaka or Kyoto, then you can pretty much go to any station that you want to with a wheelchair. So I think right now the rule is that any train station that has over 3,000 daily visitors. Now that sounds like a lot of people, but in Japan that's not that much really. So that's just in one day. If there's 3,000 people that come and go through that location, then they have to be legally be accessible, have some sort of accessible route. So that means that about 96% of the stations in Tokyo are accessible now. So you can just go to your local train station and you tell the staff where it is you want to go, and then they will prepare a ramp for you, and then they will help you get on the train. But not only that, they'll actually go ahead and they'll call to the station where you want to go to, or if there's any transfers you have, and they'll go to make call ahead. And then when you arrive, somebody will be there waiting for you. And so it's a really easy way to get around big cities. To get around between the cities, though, you probably need to use the bullet train, so the Shinkansen. And it works pretty much in the same way, except that you must book it in advance. You can't just sort of show up and ride it easily. So there's a thing called a JR Pass, which is the Japan Rail Pass. It's kind of ride as much as you want kind of thing. So a lot of tourists get that. So a lot of people, you can just get on, if you're ambulatory, you can just get on and ride it. If you're in a wheelchair, then you should book it in advance. So that's probably the easiest way to get around if you're on the ground here.
Okay. And then what about the ports, the area around the ports?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in that area. I'm on some government boards, so I do know that the port facilities themselves are almost completely all accessible now. Unfortunately, it's the access to the ports that's the bigger problem. I've interacted with some people who are coming here on cruises, and they found that the biggest issue is that when they arrive in port, there's no way to connect easily to the local transportation. So it would sometimes mean getting an accessible taxi, which will be a lot more money, and some of the buses aren't fully equipped. The buses that would cart people from the boat to the city are not usually accessible. So there is definitely a challenge there. There is another lady who's working in the cruise port navigation here in Japan, and she's an expert, and I've been working with her a little bit about training her guides on accessibility. So if anybody's interested in a cruise around Japan or stopping in Japan, then that is definitely one of the places to visit.
Okay, yeah, and we will put links for your website and for the Tabby Folk group forum in the description. So for those of you that are watching, hopefully you're getting some value out of this. If you are, do me a favor, go ahead and hit the like button. That way YouTube will know to share it. And you'll find links to the things we talk about, at least some of them down in the description below the video. Okay, so let me ask this site, what about the tourist attractions in Japan?
Yeah, there's been a huge movement to make tourist attractions more accessible recently, particularly, obviously, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and Paralympics were a big part of that. Unfortunately, they won't be happening as planned, of course, pushed back a year. And then on top of that, now it looks like there won't be any foreign visitors allowed to come in. But because of that, there's been a lot more of a focus on tourism for all as well. The Japanese tourism agency, the travel bureau, they've been working a lot on encouraging accessible tourism by giving funding to different places to make it accessible. And so you'll find that a lot of the major sites are largely accessible. It depends on when it was made, of course. So some of the ones like Tokyo Skytree, which is a relatively new tall tower, is completely accessible. But even some of the more historic buildings now are also becoming more accessible by putting in ramps and elevators in certain locations. Obviously, if it's quite old, if it's a World Heritage Site, there's only so much they can do. But I think the biggest thing right now is that in Japan, there's a very aging population right now. And because of that, there are a lot more people who are elderly who have mobility needs. And that's sort of a big driver, I think, behind that, especially with temples and shrines, because they're not just tourist attractions. There are places that people go to as a part of their daily life as well. So I've been to some temples out in the middle of nowhere, and I found ramps because there's somebody going to a service there, or at a shrine they're having a wedding, and the grandma and grandpa were going, so they had the ramps built. So it's definitely changing quite a bit. So yeah, you still have some challenges at some places, and particularly if they're older. But I think for the most part, you can go to a lot of the attractions you want to go to.
Okay, so I'm going to throw you a curveball question here.
Okay.
Let's say that somebody that needs mobility assistance comes to Japan.
Mhm.
What would you say the top 2 or 3 attractions that they can see are that are accessible? If you had to pick your favorite
Okay.
3, maybe.
I'll limit myself to Tokyo right now. If you're coming to Tokyo, I would definitely recommend, well, the top 3 places would definitely be for anybody, would be, which is in Asakusa. It's one of the probably the oldest temple in Tokyo. It's been on a lot of tourist books on the cover of that. And it's got the big lantern at the very front of it. So it's quite distinguished. And they have done an excellent job of becoming accessible. They've removed the steps that a lot of on the path up to the main temple. They've even put an elevator in on the side of the temple. And they've done it in a really unique way that blends it in with the actual architecture of the building. So you can't actually tell. So they did such a good job that they had to put a symbol on it that this is an elevator, because otherwise people were missing it. So normally, people are complaining that the elevator sticks out too much, but they've done such a good job that people are actually missing it. So that's an excellent place to go to. After that is Meiji Shrine. So Japan has 2 religions. The first one is Buddhism, which is the temples, and the shrines, which is Shinto, which is the original Japanese religion. And so Meiji Shrine is a shrine to the Meiji Emperor, and it is also fully accessible. There used to be a long gravel path going there. It still is a long gravel path, but on the sides they put walkways for people to use in wheelchairs. They've added ramps at all the locations, so that's definitely a good one. And then I think, well, normally if I was going to recommend people visit Tokyo, I usually say that they should start with Tokyo's Sky Tree, which is a funny name, but it's the tallest building in Tokyo, or it's in Japan, and I think possibly in the world at the moment. It has a great overview of the entire city. So you can see Meiji Shrine, you can see Sensoji, and on a good day, you can see Mount Fuji. So it's a really cost-effective way to get a good view of Tokyo, and all of those are very accessible.
Oh, okay. Well, very nice. Thank you. Okay. So aside from tourist spots, how are other places? What are the other types of places they might visit? What are those like?
Yeah, there are definitely some challenges. I think that because there's a focus on making public places accessible, a lot of places that are run by small places that are run by individuals are not as good in terms of accessibility. So, for example, restaurants. A lot of people want to come to Japan and enjoy the food here. They want to have sushi, or they want to have ramen noodles, or traditional Japanese course meals, and those are all exciting places to go. But unfortunately, they suffer from the fact that a lot of times they have a stair or 2 into the building, or they'll be very narrow and only a few people can get in. And so if you're going with a wheelchair, you sort of get in the way a little bit, or maybe they'll just very, very small, or in a basement or something like that. And unfortunately, even if the restaurant wants to become accessible, they're usually just tenants in a building, so they can't do any major renovations unless the landlord says it's okay. So I found myself personally, but also a lot of others who are very much looking forward to the cuisine in Japan, sometimes find a lot of barriers in their way. So I think the best thing to do is a lot of preparation. So to find out where it is you want to go, or to look up alternatives. And there are some apps as well that are available. But right now, the Japan Tourism Association, they have created a guidebook for restaurants relatively near the Olympic venues. So that's sort of the main areas where they are. But they offer a number of alternatives for most of the types of cuisine that are available that are wheelchair accessible. So that's one of the challenges, but I think people are more aware of it now than they were before.
Yeah, I can say that's one of the things that I miss about our time in Okinawa. We used to love to go get yakisoba or some tempura, and they would be little. But again, they were typically older, more traditional restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
and so the accessibility would have definitely been a challenge. At that time, my wife didn't need a chair; it worked well for us. But like I said, we enjoyed our time in Japan. Okay, what about other disabilities besides? Oh, actually, let me back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about restaurants and shows. I mean, we talked about restaurants, but hotels and shows or
Yeah,
shop
so, sorry?
hotels and shops.
Shops, okay, yeah. So the shops, they would tend to be, again, like the restaurants, so they're quite small. Again, it depends where you're going. If you're going near a touristy area, for example, like the Sensoji area, there are a lot of tourist shops. And even if you can't get in, the staff are really very friendly. It's not the same as in a lot of other places where people are worried that you're going to steal something. So they'll let your companion bring something out to show you out of the shop. Even sometimes people are quite understanding about that. But again, yeah, similar to a lot of the restaurants, it's going to be in a small area that's hard to fit into, or has a stair, or something like that. So those things can also be challenged. But again, if you go to shopping centers or department stores, which are it's still quite a big thing here in Japan. In the department stores, they'll usually have a number of stores within the department store that are accessible. And then on the top floor or top two floors, there used to be a number of restaurants available. So that's a good place to go to. And they also usually have an accessible toilet available as well. So it's a good place to visit if you need it. In terms of hotels, again, is something they're playing catch up right now in Japan. They did a survey recently, and only of all the hotel rooms in Japan, only about 0.4% are accessible at the moment. So that's lagging quite a bit behind other countries. They're trying to make it at least 1% in the next couple of years. But again, there's some guidelines and rules, but they're not very strict. There's nothing like the ADA in the States where they're very, very precise about what a room should be like or not like. So that can be a very big challenge for people who have special needs, who do need to have that room if they're coming to Japan, because there aren't very many available. But at the same time, it can be difficult to do the actual booking, because they tend to not let you book the accessible room online. So you usually need to contact the hotel directly to do that. So that's why it's maybe good to use a travel agent or a place like hotels.com, where you can maybe interact with the hotel after you've made the booking, and be assured that you do have an accessible room. And not just, I'd also suggest to people to be careful to not assume that if they're fine in a standard room in America or the UK or wherever, that a standard room here in Japan may still pose challenges, as a lot of the bathrooms are unit baths. That means that there can be a step up into the bathroom, even in a standard room, just to be aware of those kind of things. But yeah, on the website, I have a number of hotels that do have accessible rooms, as well as much information and pictures as I could possibly provide. So I'd maybe use that as a starting guide.
Okay, and so I'm going to assume that your best option for accessible rooms is probably the major chains in the big cities.
Yeah, and also a lot of the foreign hotels, because they have to have general universal accessible rooms across the hotel chain. So something like a Holiday Inn or a Marriott or something like that, you're more likely to find success than a smaller business hotel here in Japan.
Yeah, it was interesting. If you've never been to Japan, a lot of times you don't really understand what crowding is like, because so many other places have space. I remember it was interesting. The hotel we stayed at before we left Okinawa, I was out of base housing and getting ready to come back to the States. And the parking lot for the hotel, it was like one of those puzzles with one empty space where you have to move things around and try to get them in order, because you gave them your keys, and your car might be parked on the outside when you come in at night. And the next morning it'd be all the way on the far inside corner, and they would have to back out all of the cars out of the parking lot to get your car out. So space in many parts of Japan is at a very, very premium.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes the rooms smaller, makes a lot of things more challenging. And that's, again, most of those things date back, to the war, or a lot of things way before that. So
yeah,
they're not easily remodeled.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how about scooters?
Scooters are a challenge, and I think that people who are using scooters before they come, particularly listeners here, it's really important to investigate and to look into the places you want to go before you come. If it's possible to use maybe a wheelchair instead when you come to Japan, that might be the safest bet to ensure that you're going to have a good time. Now, the reason is that scooters are not very common here in Japan, and because of that, a lot of the understanding about scooters isn't quite well advanced. And so a lot of people don't know what to do because it's not a wheelchair. There were a lot of scooters that were used for elderly. There were more road scooters, and some people tried to take them onto trains at times. And because of that, there was, a number of different problems. And so for a long time, the train lines all out banned scooters on the train lines. So you couldn't, there's a number of times people would come then from abroad using a scooter, and then they'd have this horrible realization that they couldn't use the train. Now, things have gotten improved recently because of the foreign visitors. So there's still a lot of places where you can't easily use a scooter, and they also have a new certification. So if your scooter is certain dimensions, and as well as maybe can turn in a short radius, then it can be allowed to be used at certain stations. I think I've heard some people at tourist attractions also have had some challenges. If it was something like an old building, they don't want people coming in on the gravel tracks with the scooters. That's the impression. I think a lot of people, maybe the staff, they've been trained that this is what a wheelchair is, and then so you're allowed to have wheelchairs, but something that's not a wheelchair, then they don't know what to do. So it's easier just to say no. If you're coming with a scooter, just be warned that you might have some challenges like that. Think of it as an opportunity to pave the way for the next set of scooter users. But if you prefer to avoid any challenges like that, then it might be best to maybe rent a wheelchair and take a wheelchair with you for that trip, or at least just be aware that might happen.
Okay, so need to expect that might be a challenge. What about renting equipment like wheelchairs? Is rental equipment readily available?
I wouldn't say it's readily available, but there are a number of companies who are realizing the potential of rentals to foreign visitors now. In Japan, we have a universal healthcare system. So any of the rental companies, they're more focused on renting through the city office kind of thing. So the city will tell when somebody needs a wheelchair, they'll make a contract with the city, and then the wheelchair company will rent it through that system. And so they're not very used to renting on an individual basis or renting for only a few days. So there's a lot of companies that do exist, but haven't realized the business opportunity yet of renting to foreign visitors. But there are a few now. And also on the website, we have a rental form. So if people are interested in renting something, then they can get in contact. And we don't rent directly, but we'll put them in contact with somebody who they can rent from. But so that's also a possibility. There are things you can get regular pushchairs. There are a few companies that do rent scooters, but again, with the warning, as well as hoists. So if you have trouble moving from a wheelchair to the bed, a lot of different equipment. I think for the most part, any equipment that you find in another country generally is available here. It's just a matter of finding a company that will rent to you.
Okay, so that brings to mind. What about oxygen? If somebody needed oxygen,
Oxygen is very, very difficult because to rent oxygen tanks here, you need medical certification from a doctor, a Japanese doctor. And so, from what I understand, the people I've had interactions with, they've had to avoid the trip because they couldn't get oxygen while they were here. You can bring things like a CPAP machine or something that doesn't require the oxygen itself. But if you need to use oxygen on a regular basis, it could definitely prevent you from visiting Japan, I think, unfortunately.
okay. All right. So, and I would assume that would make something like because then this question comes up about cruises is there are people that like to travel that need peritoneal dialysis. And I'm assuming that would be a challenge to find rental equipment for that as well then.
As far as I know, I think I have heard one place that can provide it, but again, it would definitely require a lot of investing in researching. If people are interested in asking questions, they can join the Japan group on Tabi Folk and we can work together to try to find answers. I think that's one of the things I found as I've been running the website is that I don't know everything. And it's a good reminder to often have. And because of that, I get to hear other people's opinions and answers, and I learn as well. I don't want to say, oh, no, we can't do that in Japan, because it just might mean that I just don't know, but maybe we can. So asking the questions is really important. And we could probably try and find something to help you.
Okay. Yeah. And for those that are listening, I would encourage you to link for the Tabi Folk Forum, because there's discussions all over the world there. In fact, it was interesting. I have an interview from somebody I met on the forum about Romania coming up. Actually, it's been posted by the time this one gets posted, but so it's interesting that this Tabi Folk Forum is really starting to become a resource. And I would encourage everybody that has travels with challenges, because in the forum we talk about cruising, we talk about land packages. There are people that you can connect with. There are tourist bureaus. There's just so much information there. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Okay, let me go back to questions for you. What about the buses, both airport buses and even local buses and long distance buses?
So the local city buses now tend more often than not to be accessible. So if you're in, again, a big city like in Tokyo or in Kyoto or Osaka, then the city buses are in general accessible. In Kyoto, actually, I think you mostly have to use the bus to get around to a lot of places anyways. they have a ramp out the side of them. And so the only unfortunate thing is that the ramp is not automatic. So what happens is the bus driver has to stop the bus, get out of the bus, take a ramp out of a little closet, put the ramp down for you. And hopefully he's parked in a good enough place that he doesn't need to readjust his parking. And then also if there's, there's only a few places that you can actually go on the bus. So hopefully those are available. So especially in a place like Kyoto, I'd definitely recommend that people try to get on and off at the terminals, because it might just be easier because to get on midway through the route, especially it's already filled with tourists, it can be very difficult to get on. But in general, the buses you can be ridden. If you go to someplace out in the country, you might find that, like anywhere in the world, not all of them are accessible. So you'll find that maybe on this route they're all accessible, or on this route there's like every third bus is accessible or something like that, or they'll have it on the schedule, this bus is accessible or something like that. But definitely, I think the rule of thumb across the country now is that if you're going to get a new bus, you have to get an accessible one. Now, the biggest challenge, and the thing that I really wish would change soon, is that the highway buses, as well as the airport buses, so like the coach buses, so you see like when you have the luggage at the bottom and then the seats up a small flight of steps, there are very few to close to none that are accessible at the moment without getting a sort of a direct hire. The limousine airport bus from Tokyo, from Haneda and Narita, there's I think one or at least maybe two a day that are accessible, but you need to book it in advance. Let them know that you'll be coming. But again, since there's only two per day, you might end up, if your timing's not up well, you might end up waiting 4 or 5 hours for it. So in that case, it might be just best to take the train anyways, because both are connected by train. And buses between cities at this point, the vast majority are not accessible. So that can really put a damper on trying to visit places out in the country.
I would imagine that a long distance bus, while it has facilities for fully able people, there would probably be no way for somebody in a wheelchair to be able to use the restroom if they needed to.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So yeah. So that brings me back. Let me back up a question now. On the train, if you're taking a long distance train, are the restrooms on the train accessible?
Yes. So if you are booking the wheelchair accessible seat on the Shinkansen train, the bullet train, they're in the same car as the accessible toilet. So you're guaranteed a toilet for there. And even in my big power wheelchair, I can get in the toilets on the majority of the trains. There are there isn't just one bullet train in Japan. The main ones going between Tokyo and Kyoto and Osaka, they're sort of the newer ones, and they have very big wheelchair accessible washrooms in them. If you're going up to northern Japan, or if you're in Kyushu or some of the other smaller islands, then you will maybe find some that have toilets that are larger than others, but might have very difficult time getting a wheelchair in. They're working right now on improving the number of seats available as well. And up until now, it's been about 1 or 2 per train. Now they're trying to up that to at least, I think it's about 6 per train on some of the lines. So they're definitely making big improvements in that, as well as decreasing the amount of time that you need to book them in advance. So so once you're on the train, you're usually good for a bathroom. So.
Okay. All right. Now, what about medications in Japan?
Yeah, Japan has some very strict rules on medications. So particularly for people who have ADHD, and I think there's some other ones that are often challenges. That if there's any sort of some stimulant drug in the medication you take, it's often quite strictly controlled here in Japan. So there are procedures for properly declaring your medicine. So that's very important if you're coming. If you have anything that you might wonder, if this is okay or not. I haven't dealt with it personally, but I know a friend who does need medication and needs to take it into Japan. And when they do that, they contact the drug control board part of the immigration. And usually within a day, they'll get back to them about what they need to do, what the proper procedures are, and then the number of days worth of medication you can bring in Japan. So even if it's something that you think, in the States, I can get it over the counter, there are some that, as with most controlled substances, they're not very forgiving at the border. And so it's very important to check those things before you go. There are a few that I think nothing can be done, but the vast majority of them are, as long as you follow the procedures and you get the proper declaration forms, then you should be fine.
Okay. But again, it's one of those things they want to double check their meds long in advance to make sure they get everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess the last question is, what about the toilet arrangement? Are accessible toilets easily found or not so easily found?
Japan, the main things it does right, probably the best one is the toilet. So there are toilets that are readily available across Japan, including for people with disabilities. It's almost unheard of now to not find an accessible toilet in any public toilet area. So you usually have a men's toilet and a women's toilet, and then a separate accessible toilet. So for when I was a kid growing up, it was always a horrible thing for me because I need help. And whenever I'd go out, it would always be with my mom. And so whenever I need to use the washroom, it was always saying, do we use the men's washroom or the women's washroom? And that was always a big challenge. But here in Japan, they have a separate washroom that's quite spacious. It has a lot of different equipment available in it. Not all of them, they're all quite varied. So you can't sort of say that they're all like this, but some of them will have adult-sized changing beds available. A lot of them will have cleaning stations for colostomy bags, which I've heard from some people they found so freeing that a lot of places in the States that they can't do that or they have to think about things in advance. Whereas in Japan, there are so many of them that it was quite freeing for them to travel around. But they tend to be available in any train station, any department store, hotels, any public building, and actually even in any public park, you're almost guaranteed to find an accessible toilet. So that's one of the really good things about Japan for sure. And they're not locked. So I should probably mention that. A lot of places like in Europe and Australia, they'll have a special key for people to use accessible toilets. And you need to buy those in advance. But in Japan, none of the toilets are locked, so you don't need to worry about getting them like that.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Very good. It was kind of interesting because my wife, and of course, this would have been 40 years ago, my wife wound up out in a public area and found a traditional, let's say a traditional Japanese toilet, and she was quite confused about how all of that worked, but I'm sure that things have changed a lot since then.
Well, you still will find some traditional Japanese toilets around, but they're getting rid of them. Even most Japanese people don't want to use them anymore. So,
yeah. But yeah, it was, like I said, we enjoyed our time in Japan, and it was interesting. Then, while we didn't need the accessibility, the bus system, the city buses and stuff were so convenient. They've done a very good job with mass transit, better than a lot of places, in the U.S. And for us, we didn't speak any Japanese. Well, we spoke so little Japanese, it might as well have not spoken Japanese. And so let me ask about that. How are, we talked about the train station. If you don't speak Japanese, is everybody pretty good with English and what languages are commonly spoken that you can get help if you need it with?
Yeah, I think right now, well, most people have taken English in middle school and high school in Japan. So everybody has some basic level of English. And I think most people probably have more English than they'll let on. And it's maybe because they don't feel confident using it, or they can't speak perfectly, so they don't want to let the cat out of the bag that they can speak a little bit in case they get overwhelmed. But a lot of people tend to be much better at written English than spoken English. So if you have a little memo pad or even on your phone, if you want to type some message in, they're more likely to understand that. And I think any tourist attraction, you'll definitely find somebody who can speak English. A lot of the major stations have somebody who generally will have some level of passable English. They have a device here called Pocket Talk. And basically, it's a small Android device, but its sole use is for translation. So you say something into it while holding a button, and then you let go of the button, and then it will say what you just said in the target language. So you can pass it back and forth between each other. It's basically Google Translate in a dedicated device, but a lot of tourist locations and the train stations have those now as well, and restaurants as well. A lot of them are using those, but I think everybody is excited to try their English. And yeah, if you have a phone, you probably could just use Google Translate to get around a lot of those things.
Okay. And the one thing I would encourage anybody that's going to Japan, learn a few words of Japanese, because it is amazing. We saw this when we were in Okinawa, but if you could speak just a few words, if you could just say hello, Like for example, Ohio gozaimasu is good morning. Konnichiwa or konbanwa. I mean, if you get just a few words, and it was amazing how much people appreciated the fact that you'd taken time to learn it. And I'm a believer in that if you speak English and you're traveling to other countries, if you learn a few words of the foreign language in that country, you'll be amazed at the difference it can make in how you're received.
Yeah, for sure. And I was always like, oh, wow, you speak such good Japanese.
Yeah. I would get in trouble with my Spanish sometimes because I sound like I speak really good Spanish. And if I know exactly what I'm going to say in advance, it's like playing a little tape because my accent's good, my pronunciation's good. But then when they start talking back to me, I'm in deep trouble.
Please just let this be a one-way conversation.
Yeah. If I can play my tape, we're good. If I have to respond to a question, it becomes more challenging. Josh, I've enjoyed so much our conversation. Of course, you and I know each other from the Tabby Folk Group, and I look forward to. We'll talk again, I'm sure. And hopefully, the audience got some value out of this. Do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Again, the like button lets YouTube know there was some good content on it. And we'll see everybody next time.